My supervisor pulled me aside and said, "We need to talk about what you did to your coworker's chinchilla." My vision went black around the edges. The words slammed into me like a freight train, each syllable hitting harder than the last. Chinchilla. Dead. My fault. The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers and exploded against the break room floor, ceramic shards skittering across tile like tiny screams. Hot liquid splashed up my legs, but I couldn't feel the burn through the ice flooding my veins. Marissa's face was carved from stone, her usual warm smile replaced by something cold and predatory. "Pixel's dead, David." She grabbed my elbow with fingers like steel clamps, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more terrifying than shouting. "And the security footage puts you alone with him Sunday night." The break room suddenly felt too small, the fluorescent lights too bright, the smell of microwaved lunches too nauseating. Other employees were turning to stare, their conversations dying mid-sentence as they sensed the electricity in the air. I tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. Pixel, Kendra's beloved chinchilla, the fluffy gray creature that had squeaked endlessly from its elaborate cage setup for 6 months. The animal I'd complained about in 16 separate emails to HR, the rodent whose constant noise had driven me to work late on Sunday just to escape the sound. Now it was dead, and somehow they thought I'd killed it. "Conference room. Now." Marissa's grip tightened as she steered me past Derek's shipping station, past Janet's customer service desk, past Tom's accounting cubicle. Each pair of eyes that followed our march felt like a brand burning into my skull. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know that David Chen had been accused of murdering a chinchilla. The absurdity would have been laughable if my entire career wasn't disintegrating with every step. The conference room door slammed behind us with the finality of a coffin lid. Marissa didn't invite me to sit. Instead, she spread photographs across the polished table like a dealer laying out cards for the final hand. Pixel's small gray body, motionless at the bottom of his cage, fur matted and lifeless. His water bottle, still full, his food pellets, scattered and untouched. The exercise wheel that had tortured me for months with its metallic squeaking, now silent forever. "Calcium oxalate poisoning," she said, her finger tapping one particular photo that showed Pixel's contorted form. "Do you know what that is, David? It's what kills chinchillas when someone feeds them the wrong plants. Someone who researched exactly how to murder a small animal without leaving obvious traces." She paused, letting the accusation sink in like poison. Someone who spent months documenting their hatred for this particular chinchilla. My legs gave out. I collapsed into the nearest chair, my hands shaking so violently I had to grip the armrests to steady them. "I didn't kill Pixel. Jesus Christ, Marissa, I would never hurt an animal. Never." The words came out as a croak, barely audible even to myself. She leaned across the table, her face inches from mine, close enough that I could smell her vanilla perfume, mixed with something else. Something that smelled like fear. "Sunday night, David. Your keycard accessed the building at 6:47 p.m. You were alone in this office for 36 minutes. Alone with Pixel." She pulled out a security report, my employee ID number highlighted in accusatory yellow. "The cameras malfunctioned that evening. Very convenient for someone who knows our IT systems. Very convenient for someone who needed to commit murder without witnesses." The Sunday visit. My stomach lurched as the memory crystallized. I'd come in to finish the Morrison account report, desperate for quiet after a week of family crisis and deadline pressure. My father's emergency surgery had thrown my schedule into chaos, and I'd been drowning in backed-up work. The office after hours was my sanctuary, free from Pixel's incessant squeaking and Kendra's anxious hovering over her pet. "I was working on financial projections," I said, hearing how weak and pathetic I sounded. The Morrison quarterly report was due Monday morning. I needed silence to concentrate. Marissa's expression didn't flicker. She'd already made up her mind about my guilt, and nothing I said would penetrate her certainty. She opened another folder, this one thick with printed emails bearing the letterhead of our HR department. My complaints about Pixel stretched back months, each one meticulously documented and time-stamped. The progression looked damning even to me. Initial concerns about workplace appropriateness, escalating to noise complaints, then health and safety issues, finally suggestions that the chinchilla posed risks to customers and employees. 16 official complaints in 8 weeks, Marissa said, counting through the pages. 16 documented instances of you targeting Kendra's emotional support animal. The pattern is clear, David. You started with policy objections, moved to environmental concerns, then began suggesting the animal was dangerous. Classic escalation behavior leading to violence. Each email felt like evidence at my trial. My words, taken out of context and arranged to paint a picture of obsession and malice rather than legitimate workplace frustration. The squeaking wheel that had driven me to distraction during busy periods. The musky smell that required constant air fresheners. The unprofessional image of having a rodent in a customer-facing business environment. All of it twisted into motive for murder. "Where's Kendra?" I asked, suddenly realizing her desk had been empty when I'd arrived that morning. "Does she know what you're accusing me of?" The thought of facing her, of seeing grief and accusation in her gentle eyes, made bile rise in my throat. Kendra was fragile on her best days, relying on Pixel's presence to manage crippling anxiety. That chinchilla wasn't just a pet to her. It was medical equipment prescribed by her therapist. Marissa's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing something that might have been guilt. Kendra found Pixel yesterday morning when she came in early. She's on bereavement leave, completely destroyed. That animal was her lifeline, David. Her way of coping with the stress that makes normal life nearly impossible for her. The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke from a funeral pyre. I complained about noise and smell, I said, desperation making my voice crack. That doesn't make me a killer. You've known me for 3 years, Marissa. I've handled your biggest accounts, worked overtime without complaint, never had a single disciplinary action. Does that sound like someone who would poison an innocent animal? She pulled out another document, this one bearing official police department letterhead. Detective Ray Kowalski wants to see you this afternoon. This is beyond company policy now, David. This is a criminal investigation into animal cruelty with intent to cause emotional distress. The district attorney's office is reviewing evidence to determine what charges to file. The words hit me like individual blows. Criminal investigation, animal cruelty, district attorney, charges. These were terms from courtroom dramas and newspaper headlines, not from my life, not connected to my name and reputation. I gripped the conference table edge to keep from sliding off the chair, fighting waves of nausea that threatened to empty my stomach across Marissa's carefully arranged evidence. You're suspended immediately, she continued, her voice returning to its bureaucratic monotone. You'll clean out your desk under supervision and surrender your building access card. Any attempt to contact employees, especially Kendra, will result in additional consequences. Company legal has instructed me to preserve all evidence and cooperate fully with law enforcement. The walk back to my cubicle felt like a death march. Every eye in the office followed my progress, conversations stopping mid-sentence as I passed. Derek from shipping actually stood up to get a better view of the suspected animal killer being led to his execution. Janet from customer service held her phone up, probably texting friends about the drama unfolding in real time. Tom from accounting whispered something to his cubicle neighbor that made them both turn and stare. My desk looked foreign under the fluorescent lights. 3 years of accumulated belongings, suddenly seeming like evidence in a crime scene. Coffee mug with the company logo, family photos from last Christmas, a small cactus Kendra had given me for my birthday. Ironic that she'd chosen a plant, given that a plant had allegedly killed her beloved pet. I wrapped each item carefully in tissue paper, hyper-aware of Marissa watching my every movement for signs of guilt or hidden contraband. Kendra's empty workstation dominated the space beside mine, her elaborate chinchilla habitat standing like a monument to Pixel's death and my supposed crime. The multi-level cage system had cost hundreds of dollars and represented months of research into optimal chinchilla care. Exercise wheels on every level, hiding spots crafted from natural wood, feeding stations positioned for easy access. Now it stood empty, except for scattered bedding and forgotten toys, a shrine to my alleged victim. The silence from the habitat was unnerving after months of constant activity. Pixel had been nocturnal, most active during late afternoon hours when I was trying to concentrate on complex financial reports. The squeaking wheels, rustling bedding, and occasional chirping sounds had formed a soundtrack to my workday that I'd grown to hate. Now the absence of that noise felt wrong, like a song missing its rhythm section. "Hurry up," Marissa said, checking her watch with obvious impatience. "Detective Kowalski expects you at the police station by 2 o'clock. You'll want time to find a lawyer before then." Her casual mention of legal representation made the situation feel even more surreal and threatening. She genuinely believed I needed criminal defense, that the evidence against me warranted serious charges. I finished packing quickly, avoiding eye contact with co-workers who had gathered to witness my professional execution. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have, weighted down with the gravity of false accusations and destroyed trust. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard conversations resume behind me, voices dissecting my character, my motives, my likelihood of guilt. The jury of my peers had already begun deliberating. The police station parking lot was nearly empty at 2 in the afternoon, creating an atmosphere of isolation that matched my emotional state. Detective Kowalski met me at the front desk, younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance and demeanor. He led me through a maze of hallways to a small interview room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. The recording equipment in the corner made everything feel official and permanent. Detective Kowalski explained that this was a voluntary interview, that I wasn't under arrest and could leave at any time. However, he also read me my rights and strongly suggested I might want legal representation present. The Miranda warning delivered in such calm, professional tones felt more threatening than any shouted accusations would have. I declined the attorney, still confident that my innocence would be obvious once I explained the misunderstanding. Detective Kowalski activated the recording device, stating the date, time, and participants for the official record. His first questions were deceptively casual, asking about my background, employment history, and relationship with coworkers. The soft approach that would gradually build toward more damaging territory. "Let's talk about Pixel," he said, opening a folder filled with printed emails. "These complaints to HR show increasing frustration with the chinchilla's presence in your workplace. Walk me through your thought process as these concerns developed." His pen was poised over a legal pad, ready to capture every word that might later be used against me in court. I explained about the constant noise from exercise wheels, the musky odor that permeated our work area despite daily cage cleaning, the unprofessional atmosphere created by having a rodent in a customer-facing business environment. My complaints had been legitimate workplace issues, I insisted, not personal attacks on Kendra or her emotional support animal. Detective Kowalski took detailed notes, occasionally asking for clarification about specific incidents or timeline details. This email from October mentions potential health and safety risks, he said, reading from one of my HR complaints. You wrote that Pixel posed unacceptable hazards to employees and customers. What specific risks were you concerned about? He looked up from the document, his expression neutral, but his eyes intensely focused. The question felt like a carefully laid trap. I'd been thinking about allergies and respiratory issues, potential problems with customers who might have adverse reactions to animal dander or droppings in a retail environment. Some people were severely allergic to rodents, and having Pixel in a customer-facing business seemed like a liability waiting to happen. But explaining this to Detective Kowalski felt like providing ammunition for the prosecution's case against me. You have a background in information technology, he continued, consulting another document. Network administration, database management, security systems, the kind of skills that would allow someone to disable building surveillance cameras. His tone remained conversational, but the implication was crystal clear. I had the technical knowledge to cover my tracks by eliminating video evidence. The interview continued for 3 hours, covering every aspect of my relationship with Kendra, my knowledge of chinchilla care and dietary restrictions, and my movements during the weekend when the poisoning occurred. Detective Kowalski was methodical and patient, asking probing questions about my Sunday evening building access and the convenient timing of the security camera malfunction. 36 minutes alone in the office, he said, reviewing the keycard logs. That's plenty of time to research chinchilla toxicity online, locate poisonous plants in the office environment, and arrange them near Pixel's habitat. A peace lily, for example, contains high levels of calcium oxalate. Move it close enough to the cage, and an incurious animal might ingest fallen leaves or flowers. My blood turned to ice water. He was describing a specific method of murder, complete with weapon and delivery system. Someone had researched chinchilla poisoning extensively enough to know about calcium oxalate and its sources. Someone had planned this killing with scientific precision, using knowledge I didn't possess, and implementing a strategy I never could have devised. I don't know anything about plants or animal toxicity, I protested. I can barely keep a cactus alive. I wouldn't even know where to start researching how to poison a chinchilla. Detective Kowalski made notes about my denial, but his expression suggested he'd heard similar claims from countless guilty suspects. The interview concluded with Detective Kowalski informing me that the investigation was ongoing and that I should remain available for further questioning. The district attorney's office would review all evidence before deciding whether to file formal charges. He recommended that I retain legal counsel immediately, regardless of my guilt or innocence, because the legal system was complex and unforgiving. I left the police station feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The voluntary interview had felt more like an interrogation designed to extract a confession rather than a fact-finding mission. Detective Kowalski had been professional, but clearly skeptical of my explanations, treating my denials as predictable lies from a cornered suspect. That evening, I sat in my apartment researching criminal defense attorneys and trying to comprehend how completely my life had imploded. 48 hours ago, I'd been a respected employee with a promising career and solid reputation. Now I was suspended from work, under police investigation, and facing potential felony charges that could destroy everything I'd spent years building. I found Jennifer Wu through online searches for attorneys specializing in false accusation cases. Her client reviews praised her aggressive defense strategies and her success rate in overturning wrongful prosecutions. Our phone conversation that night revealed that while the evidence against me was circumstantial, it was potentially strong enough to secure a conviction if additional proof emerged during the investigation. Jennifer advised me to document everything I could remember about the timeline of events and to avoid discussing the case with anyone except her. She was particularly intrigued by the security camera malfunction, viewing it as a potential avenue for establishing reasonable doubt. Someone with access to the building's IT systems had deliberately disabled surveillance, and that person might not have been me. Over the next several days, I conducted careful research into Evergreen Pet Supply's building security and access protocols. The office directory listed numerous contractors and service personnel with system privileges, including IT maintenance staff, cleaning crews, and equipment repair technicians. Anyone with administrative access could potentially have disabled the cameras before committing a crime. One name stood out: Trevor Lang, a former IT contractor who had been terminated from his building maintenance contract 8 months earlier under circumstances described only as policy violations. Trevor would have possessed both the technical knowledge to disable security systems and potentially harbored resentment against building tenants who might have contributed to his dismissal. I shared this information with Jennifer Wu, who immediately hired a private investigator to research Trevor's background and recent activities. What we discovered was disturbing and potentially relevant to Pixel's murder. Trevor had been fired for accessing confidential client data and making inappropriate comments about female employees, behavior that had culminated in formal complaints and threats of legal action. More significantly, Trevor's social media profiles revealed a troubling pattern of anger toward emotional support animals and their owners. His posts were filled with rants about fake service dogs and attention-seeking pet owners who brought animals into inappropriate environments. One particular post from 2 weeks before Pixel's death specifically mentioned chinchillas as rodents that don't belong in civilized workplaces. The private investigator's report revealed that Trevor had been in significant financial distress since losing his building maintenance contract, struggling with unemployment and mounting debts. His anger had apparently focused on the building's tenants, whom he blamed for his termination and current difficulties. Pixel represented everything Trevor hated about modern workplace accommodations and entitled employees. Armed with this new information, Jennifer contacted Detective Kowalski to present evidence of an alternative suspect in Pixel's death. Trevor had motive, means, and opportunity, she argued. While my supposed motive was based on routine workplace complaints that fell far short of homicidal intent, the detective agreed to investigate Trevor's background and whereabouts, though he warned that this wouldn't automatically clear me of suspicion. Meanwhile, my suspension from Evergreen Pet Supply continued indefinitely, with Marissa informing me that reinstatement would depend on the outcome of the criminal investigation. The company's legal department had advised against any contact between me and current employees, effectively isolating me from colleagues who might have provided character references or supported my version of events. The isolation was psychologically devastating. Friends and family struggled to understand how I'd become involved in such a bizarre situation, their support tinged with unspoken questions about my possible guilt. Former coworkers avoided my calls, apparently advised by company legal to maintain distance until the investigation concluded. Even casual acquaintances seemed to view me with suspicion after news of the case spread through our professional network. I spent my days researching chinchilla care and toxicity, trying to understand how Pixel could have been killed and what evidence might point to the real perpetrator. The calcium oxalate found in his system could have come from dozens of common houseplants, certain vegetables, or commercial products containing the compound. Someone would have needed specialized knowledge to select an effective poison and deliver it without detection. My research revealed that chinchillas were extraordinarily sensitive animals, requiring precise environmental conditions and carefully controlled diets to remain healthy. They couldn't tolerate temperature fluctuations, high humidity, or inappropriate foods. The more I learned, the more I realized that Pixel's death represented a sophisticated understanding of chinchilla physiology and the specific compounds that would prove fatal. 3 weeks into my suspension, Detective Kowalski called with an update that changed everything. Police had located Trevor Lang and conducted a search of his apartment in connection with unrelated computer fraud charges. Hidden among his possessions were research materials about chinchilla care and toxicity, including detailed information about calcium oxalate poisoning and its effects on small mammals. Even more damning were photographs on Trevor's phone showing the interior of our office building, apparently taken during an unauthorized visit on the Sunday evening when I'd been working late. The images were time-stamped during the exact period when the security cameras had malfunctioned, providing visual proof of Trevor's presence at the scene of the crime. The photographs revealed Trevor's detailed knowledge of our office layout, including the location of Pixel's habitat and the various houseplants positioned throughout the workspace. One image specifically showed a peace lily that had been moved closer to Kendra's desk area, positioned where an inquisitive chinchilla might have access to toxic leaves or flowers that fell through the cage bars. Detective Kowalski explained that Trevor had initially denied any involvement in Pixel's death, claiming his building visit was unrelated to the chinchilla poisoning. However, confronted with the photographic evidence and research materials found in his apartment, Trevor's story began to fall apart under intensive questioning. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered Trevor's detailed online research into chinchilla toxicity, conducted in the weeks leading up to Pixel's death. His browser history revealed searches for chinchilla poison, calcium oxalate plants, how to kill rodents, and security camera hacking. The digital evidence painted a clear picture of premeditation and planning. Trevor's confession came after 12 hours of interrogation and the presentation of overwhelming evidence against him. He admitted to entering the building using outdated access credentials that had never been properly deactivated after his contract termination. His original plan had been simple vandalism, revenge against the tenants, and building management he blamed for his employment difficulties. However, encountering Pixel's elaborate habitat had triggered his rage against emotional support animals and their owners. He decided to poison the chinchilla as an additional way to cause distress and disruption in the workplace, using his knowledge of building security to disable surveillance cameras and cover his tracks. Trevor's method had been sophisticated and cruel. He'd researched chinchilla dietary restrictions extensively, learning that calcium oxalate was quickly fatal to the animals, even in small doses. He'd repositioned office plants to make Pixel's death appear accidental, hoping that scattered leaves and flowers would be attributed to natural foraging behavior rather than deliberate murder. The confession revealed that Trevor had specifically timed his crime to coincide with my Sunday evening work session, having observed my pattern of weekend office visits through previous surveillance of the building. He'd planned to use my presence as a convenient cover story, knowing that my documented complaints about Pixel would make me the obvious suspect in any investigation. Detective Kowalski called me personally to deliver news of Trevor's arrest and confession on charges, including animal cruelty, breaking and entering, computer fraud, and evidence tampering. All suspicion had been cleared from my name, he explained, and the district attorney's office would be issuing a formal statement acknowledging my wrongful investigation in the case. The relief was overwhelming, but it was tempered by anger at the weeks of hell I'd endured due to circumstantial evidence and rushed judgment. My reputation had been damaged, my career disrupted, and my faith in the justice system severely shaken. Trevor's confession vindicated me legally, but it couldn't undo the psychological trauma of being falsely accused and publicly suspected of animal cruelty. My reinstatement at Evergreen Pet Supply came with formal apologies from Marissa and the company's executive team, along with full back pay for my suspension period and reimbursement for legal fees I'd incurred during the investigation. However, returning to the office felt uncomfortable despite my vindication. The damage to workplace relationships had been done, and several co-workers seemed unable to completely move past their initial suspicions. Kendra's reaction to learning about Trevor's arrest was complex and emotionally charged. Relief that her pet's killer had been caught mixed with guilt about the suspicion that had fallen on me during the investigation. She approached me privately to apologize for not defending my character more strongly, explaining that grief over Pixel's death had clouded her judgment about potential perpetrators. She provided a detailed written statement to HR acknowledging my innocence and commending my professional character, but our working relationship remained strained by the traumatic circumstances surrounding her pet's murder. The shared space where Pixel's habitat had stood felt haunted by memories of squeaking wheels and the false accusations that had nearly destroyed my career. Several co-workers who had contributed to the email complaints that formed the foundation of the case against me approached with awkward apologies. They explained that their noise and odor concerns had been genuine workplace issues, not intended as evidence in a criminal investigation. Others seemed to avoid me entirely, apparently uncomfortable with their role in what had nearly become a wrongful prosecution. The company implemented new policies regarding emotional support animals in the workplace, requiring advance approval from HR, medical documentation from licensed professionals, and specific accommodations to address legitimate employee concerns. The guidelines also established procedures for addressing complaints about support animals without creating hostile work environments or retaliatory situations. Trevor Lang was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in prison for animal cruelty and related charges, along with probation requirements that included mental health counseling and community service with animal welfare organizations. His case became a cautionary tale about the consequences of workplace revenge and the innocent people who can be harmed when investigations focus too quickly on convenient suspects. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of thorough documentation, immediate legal representation, and maintaining professionalism even when facing false accusations. I also gained new appreciation for the complexity of workplace accommodations and the need for policies that balance competing employee needs fairly and compassionately. Most importantly, I learned not to take my reputation, job security, or personal freedom for granted. All three can be threatened by circumstances completely beyond my control, destroyed by coincidences and circumstantial evidence that create compelling narratives of guilt. The weeks of suspension and investigation left lasting effects on my confidence and trust in institutional justice. 2 years later, I still work at Evergreen Pet Supply, though I've been promoted to a senior management position that allows me to help shape company policies around employee relations and conflict resolution. The chinchilla incident, as it came to be known within the company, ultimately led to positive changes in how sensitive situations are investigated and resolved. Pixel's legacy became one of improved workplace policies, better security protocols, and more thorough investigative procedures that protect both employees and animals from future tragedies. While I couldn't bring back Kendra's beloved pet, I could help ensure that other innocent parties wouldn't face the nightmare of false accusation and wrongful suspension that had nearly destroyed my life and career. The trauma of being falsely accused never completely faded, but it transformed into something useful, a deep commitment to fairness, thorough investigation, and protecting the innocent from rush to judgment that can destroy lives as effectively as any crime.